I got my first YouTube comment the other day, which basically said, "You're a random guy with a low quality camera." Now, I'm going to defend the camera. The camera's actually pretty good. I just saved the settings wrong on basically all the shorts I recorded over a couple of days. But he's right. I am some random guy because in the passion and enthusiasm I had for starting to create this content, I never actually outlined what this channel is and who I am. So that's what I want to do in this video. Let's start with who am I? Well, I'm Simon. I am a data nerd, a tech nerd. I always have been. I started coding Flash games when I was 14, and I always had a love for maths. So I combined that passion for coding and mathematics, and I did a PhD in statistics, following which I went to work for a multinational media agency. Then, after I left that, I started working with startups, and that's been my life for the past 10 years. Either founding my own businesses, or working with other startups, or advising investors on helping them understand the technical aspects. And I am a technician, first and foremost. I code, I build software, I build data pipelines. But the problem is that what I started having to be able to do was more of the business aspect. As a CTO, CDO in a startup, you have to wear many hats. And those hats include coding and business, or data and business. And the problem is, like with all businesses, you don't receive any training. Businesses don't train people enough, if at all. And I think it comes down to the question people have, which is, what happens if I spend all this time, all this money, all this effort training somebody, and then they leave my business? Which is fair, but I think the better question we should be asking ourselves is, what happens if we don't train these people and then they stay? And that's why I created the Technician's MBA. Because I think everyone should have access to training. But what I noticed when I was starting to learn business terminology or investor terminology or startup terminology or anything that wasn't the technical skill set which I have spent my life to date honing, is that was written for an audience which wasn't me. Let me give you an example. In a business, there tends to be a line drawn versus technical and non-technical. Non-technical people in a business have their own language, whereas technical people have their own language. So materials written for the business are written inside of their jargon. KPIs, QBRs, other three-letter acronyms. Whereas technical people are talking about functions and code and languages and AWS and all their own set of three-letter acronyms. Which is fine, because if you're familiar with this terminology, with these words, this is all good. But take, for example, somebody in the business wants to learn how to code. Well, that's going to be more difficult, right? Because the people in the business don't understand this language. And I have taught non-technical people programming, and they're scared because they don't understand the terminology. And the same is true for technicians, because they'll try to understand the business and it won't make sense to them. And this is why I started writing the Technician's MBA on Substack. It was designed to help technical people, or for that matter, people who aren't familiar with a lot of the jargon or the terminologies that I had to become familiar with very, very quickly, in a way that I didn't have. So I had to trust my mentors, work with mentors, and work really hard to understand what was being said, because I wasn't familiar with the language they were speaking. Now, yes, it was English, but it wasn't an English I was familiar with. So that's what I've set out with the Technician's MBA, is to create a space where anyone can understand and develop their business skills, understand things that are important as an entrepreneur, Or, for example, if you're a technician who's been promoted to management responsibility, right? You get no training for that. And you're expected to be a manager. Or you're promoted to an area where you have to start giving business reports, but you're not trained on how to do them. Or these terminology or these words or these concepts aren't written in a way or taught or spoken about in a way that makes sense to people like me. So that's why I created the Technician's MBA. That's what I look to do with the Technician's MBA. But this channel, I want to do slightly more with. Yes, I'll still be talking about those topics and trying to find interesting ways to discuss them, predominantly via shorts. But I also want to talk about things that are happening in the industry, things that are happening in that intersection between business and technical, things that may impact both sides. I've created a series of shorts recently talking about articles on LinkedIn which have boiled my blood, or developments that have happened, or situations that we find ourselves in as members of the business community. So, yeah, to answer that guy, I am a random guy on the internet. My camera isn't low quality, I will defend it yet again. But this is what I'm wanting to build, and hopefully this has removed some of the randomness about who I am. If this sounds interesting to you, if this sounds something like you'd want to be a part of, hit subscribe, hit like. And what I'd also love to be able to hear from you is I want to start doing kind of Q&As. Any questions you may have, I'd love to be able to answer them. So if you have them, please drop them down in the comments. I have a plan for some short form content where I answer questions that I find from the comments. So please, if you do, drop that in. But yeah, other than that, I'm Simon. I hope you have found this interesting or potentially exciting, and I'd love to have you as part of the community moving forward. But anyway, apart from that, grand. Thanks for your time.